Okay, so part 8 will be discussing item usage and item interaction. So here we'll go through how to use our craftable items via interactions like fixing or building an object. Hello! So now we'll work how to interact with certain objects that require certain materials. So in this situation, here we have a broken UFO or a broken ship. So what we want to do is we collect certain materials in order to fix this ship. So let's get through the code. Okay, so here's our code. So as you can see here, these are the references that we'll be using throughout the script. So here is our more like UI references and also references to our inventory and then the player. Later, I'll explain further what does this do when we set this up in Unity. And then here we have integers. So this represents the total shards needed or the required shards or materials in order to fix the UFO. And then the current shards given. So this is the current shards that the player was able to provide. So let's get through the functions and the methods. Okay, so for our start method, this is where our repair panel is being initialized and also sets up our button listeners since we'll be using buttons for this. So for our update method, what this does is that it checks the player proximity if the player is near that object. So we have that if statement for that. And if the player is near, so it set this interaction text to true. So what's the interaction text? So you know when you're near an object, then there's like press O or press E to interact, or like press this button to interact when you're using a controller. So that's that text. So it will be set to true. Then here, if the player press E, then it will open the repair panel. Else, the interaction text will be set to false. So once the player just leaves the UFO, then the text will disappear. Okay, so what we have here is our open panel method. So what this does, it sets our panel to active, and then our cursor to visible, then our cursor lock state to confined. Then here we have our close repair panel. So sets our repair panel to inactive or false, and then makes our cursor invisible and locks our cursor. Then here we have our update shards left text. So basically this updates the text, showcasing how many shards or materials that we have left in order to repair the UFO. So here's the text. Okay, so next is collect shards method. So what this does is that it counts how many shards that we have in our inventory, put them in a counter called available shards, and then for every shard that is found, it will remove the shards from our inventory and then updates the current shards that we have or that was given to the UFO, updates our text, and then updates the sprite of our UFO, which I'll explain further more later on what this does. And then we have a debug log here. And here, we also have a checker if the player was able to get the total shards needed for the UFO to be repaired. Then we have an else statement here. Here we have an interface, so repair UFO sequence. So what this does is just a sequencing. Once the UFO is repaired, then it will sequence to the next scene. We have a delay here. Then here, fix UFO function. So basically what this does is that it's being called once the UFO is fixed. So if we already have given enough shards, do nothing. So basically it's just let us know that the UFO is fully repaired. Then here we have our remove shards inventory method. So what this does is that it gets the amount of the shards or the materials that we use to fix the UFO, then put it in a loop. Then for every shard or material that they found, they will remove it. So every material that is called plasma shard, with a quantity of 1, it will remove that in our inventory. So this is our update UFO sprite. So what this does is that it changes the sprite of the UFO when we reach a certain amount. So here we have so I guess it's better if we start here. So original state, original sprite rather. So this is the sprite that where the UFO is broken. And then if the current shard given is greater or equals to 2, then it would change the sprite into something like partially repaired or pre-broken UFO. And if the current shards given is greater or equal to the total shards needed, then it would change into a fully repaired sprite. Then that's it for our script. So I explain how it will be set up in our UFO. So first we build our object UFO. So here's the components for it. So sprite renderer, because again we're using 2D assets in a 3D space, and we also add our billboarding script here, and of course a collider. So what we want to do is we put the script fix UFO into our UFO object. So you can just drag it to the inspector. So as you can see, we have our script here. So I'll just explain what to put in our inspector fields. So we want here is to create a panel first. So here we have a repair panel already set up. So I'll just show you guys what I added for this panel. So we have the panel itself, of course, and then the text, shard count. So make sure to leave this text empty because it will update by itself, because we set the text, the content of that text in our script anyways, as you can see earlier. And then we have collect button. So the function of this is that it will collect the shards that we have in our inventory and then checks if it is more or equals to the amount of shards that we needed. And then fix, so what this does is that it will only appear once we have all 5 shards or all of the total shards that is needed for the repairs, and then enables us to finish the game. And then exit, so that we can just exit the panel. So I did have buttons for this. So as if we check here to the we have buttons for this. So basically I just created these PNGs and ensure that the texture type for these images are to sprite, 2D, and UID. So you just select that. And then we also want to set up our interaction text. So as you can see, there's a text above our UFO that says press E to interact. So this shows up whenever the player is near the UFO or near the object. So what we want to do is create a canvas as a child object of UFO and then create text. So for the canvas, ensure that the render mode is world space. Otherwise, it will just stick to where this canvas is. So in order to put it in the position where the UFO or the object is, we have to set it to world space. And then for our text, just set it up in a way that you want. Then just type the text content here. So okay, let's try out the game and see that if it will work. So here we have our spaceship. As you can see, it's in the broken state. So that's like the default sprite. So E, 5 plasma shards are needed to fix the UFO and travel home. So total shards that we have is 0 out of 5. So let's collect some shards first. You can see that I'm checking the crafting since we have the ingredients for the plasma shard here. So what we need is 3 stone and 1 slime for each shard. As you can see, I synthesized or crafted 3 shards. Now we have 3 shards to give for our UFO. So now we'll give the shards here. So if we click repair, so 3 out of 5 shards. And as you can see, the sprite changed into like a almost prepared state. So let's find the remaining 2 shards. Okay, so we're here. So E, then repair. So we have our UFO repaired. As you can see, the sprite changed. So yeah, so that's it. So it changes the scene for an ending scene, which this isn't the ending scene. We have to set this up in a bit, but at least we see it that it changes the scene once we did fix the UFO. And it has a little delay because of the coroutine code that I showed earlier. So let's set up an ending scene. Okay, so now we have our win scene here. So all we have to do is add it to our scene build. So it's in there, and then the index is 3. So all we have to do is change our code, some part of our code. Hold on, where is that? There. So our index is 3, so we put it 3. So it should load the win scene when we fix the UFO. Okay, so before I forget, let's go to our inventory system. I'll show you the method that we add for this tutorial. So if you guys remember, I did mention that our UFO script, fix UFO script, has a method called remove item from inventory that is referenced from our inventory system. So this is that method. So basically what it does, it takes the item's name and its amount as its parameters, and it loops through the inventory. So if they see the item that has that name, they will remove that item, and it has its remove count as well. So once the item is removed, then it will show in our console that that item, that amount of item, that count of item is removed from the inventory. Then here, just find reference of the inventory UI so that you can update the UI. So we have our else statement here. So pretty much that's the new method for this inventory system script. So don't forget to add this in our script.